Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the mysteries of a fire engine revealed. Now you may wonder what this is all about. We're going to talk about this evening is what is a fire engine all about? What's on it, what equipment it carries, what's its function, what can it do? You may well have seen fire engines hurtling towards you in the town centre with all the blue lights flashing, this big 10-ton truck approaching you, and you may have often wondered what's on board it, what's inside it. Well, let's have a look this evening. The basic design of the modern fire engine hasn't changed much since the Second World War. The modern fire service came into being with the 1947 Fire Services Act, and at that time, as you can see on the top left-hand side there, that was a sort of fire engine, or fire appliance as it's preferred to be called within the fire service, that they were driving. And you can see that the basic design and style hasn't changed much over the years. Back in the 1940s and 50s, the top left, all bright red, but you still had a front cab for the driver and the officer in charge, and then you had a back cab for the firefighters, or firemen as they were back then, and then around the sides, both sides, you had lockers. At the back you had a pump, and on the roof we tend to have ladders and other equipment. The one top right is a 1960s, 1970s model, and again you can see still the basic same design. The difference being that the back end is now made of aluminium, therefore being lighter weight. But it's still got the front cab, the rear cab, 6 lockers, 3 on either side. The front locker is always the bigger locker, the smaller locker over the wheel arch, and then a medium-sized locker at the back. And then at the rear, we've got the pump locker. Sometimes, in the olden days, they didn't have a door on that or a roller shutter. In the 1970s and onwards, they tended to have a roller shutter or a door on it. The bottom left is a more modern one, more 1990s into the 2000s. And the bottom right is a current day one. The main difference between the last three, you can see the 1990s one had the day glow orange finish. And that's now gone back to the flat red. And the main reason for that change is also with cost, because the day glow orange was thought people would see the fire engine approaching better, they thought there'd be less accidents with fire engines because of it. But as it turns out, certainly with these appliances from Lancashire, when they looked at the data with all the cuts that are occurring at the moment and they needed to save money, the data didn't suggest that there was any less accidents with fire engines, or people were more aware of the presence of the fire engine. And also it's a maintenance cost, because if you have a bump in the day glow orange one, then the cost of that repair is far more than it is with a flat red, which can be repaired like any other vehicle. But the basic design of fire engines hasn't changed much. And we say they're called fire appliances rather than fire engines because there are other fire appliances. As you can see, the top left being a turntable ladder, the top right what's known as an aerial ladder platform, which is a hydraulic platform with a ladder that goes up the side for access as well. The bottom left is what they call a control unit. That's used at major incidents for controlling the situation. And the bottom right is one of the new Dimensions machines that have been paid for by the government that were brought in after 9/11. It's a national response unit, so although they have them in different counties located around the country, they can turn out anywhere in the country. But we're going to look at and talk about what most people understand to be a fire engine. As we said, it's got the front cab, the rear cab, 3 lockers either side, equipment on the roof, and a pump locker at the rear. If we look at the roof first, on this picture you can see that the back doors there are for the pump locker. Above that, it's not very clear on this picture, it is a bit dark, but they have a 13.5 metre ladder, that's the maximum extension it can reach, a triple extension ladder, and a roof ladder, which obviously is to roll up a roof and flip over to keep you safe whilst working on roofs. They also carry on the roof suction hose, and that suction hose is what is used with the pump when it's working from open water, which we'll look at shortly. If we look into the pump locker whilst we're at the rear of the fire appliance, you can see there that the pump itself, the red bit, has 3 deliveries for the water to come out of, and the silver shiny bit below has 2 inputs. That's for when working from open water, when working from a pressure-fed supply, such as a local authority hydrant. If you take that off, that's called the collecting head, and use the suction hose that's stored above it on the roof, then you can work from open water such as a canal, a river, a duck pond, whatever. There's also, it says, a length of flaked 45mm hose. That's the big red stuff that you see firefighters squirting water with. The suction wrenches are just to undo the couplings. And the combat branch, it's just a type of branch. The branch being the bit that goes in the end of the hose with a nozzle on that creates the pressure to get the throw on the water onto the fire. Sorry about my clickers playing up for me. If we now look inside the front cab, we can see here, the top right hand picture, this is where the driver sits. The driver, not much different to any other wagon or lorry that you might see on the road, a HGV, or as they're known these days, an LGV, large goods vehicle. He's got a steering wheel, his seat. Most fire engines are automatic these days, so therefore he only has an accelerator and a brake pedal. But tucked away there, behind the steering column, is also a foot switch for him to operate his warning horns, or sirens, and he also has adjustments on the steering column to do the same. So he can alternate between the long wailing siren, the two-tone siren, and they even sometimes still have the old-fashioned two-tones that you used to be familiar with. The top left, on the other hand, that is where the officer in charge sits. So this is the person who's in charge of the fire appliance and the incident when they get there. Now, this has changed significantly over the years. Back in from the 1940s onwards, the main thing you would see in the officer in charge's position would be what we can see on the bottom picture, and that's just the radio network scheme. That's a radio scheme where the officer in charge can contact control, who give him messages, turn him out to incidents, he books availability with them and everything else. That's all done through the main radio scheme. Now, each fire authority used to have their own control, but more recent years, it's gone into regional control rooms, so a very important piece of equipment. But on the top left, what we can see, the grey box with the, what looks like paper hanging out is exactly that, but it's a printer, it's an onboard printer. And if they turn out to an incident, either from the station or whilst mobile, the printer will go off, so you get a hard copy printed in your hand of what the incident is, where it is and the address. The computer screen in front of that is a very important piece of equipment, and it really came in the late 1990s, certainly within Lancashire where I worked. In the late 1990s we trialled these, they called them MDTs back then, mobile data terminals. They're also known as VMDS these days, which is the vehicle mounted data system. The reason being, there's an awful lot of information on there. As you can probably see there, it's got a map of the county. You can zoom into that map. When you get turned out, it will zoom straight into the address that you're going to. So it's a bit like a sat-nav, you can navigate your way forward with it. But there's also a lot more information on there, such as all the service orders and procedures on how to deal with each different incident. So you're not expected these days to keep all this information in your head, as you were once of a day. It's all there for you at the touch of a button. You can print it out. So for example, if you went to an acetylene cylinder that was involved in a fire, very strict procedures to be followed on that, so as you don't have to remember them and potentially cause harm to anybody. Go to the VMDS, print it off, you've got a hard copy, you shouldn't make any mistakes. There's also lots of other information on there, information on what they call the 7.2D inspections, that's of the Fire and Rescue Services Act 2004. Section 7, paragraph subsection 2, paragraph D, and that puts the requirement to get information on any risks in the area that are deemed significant. So a simple example, there might be a stately home, Windsor Castle, something like that. All the information that's required for the firefighting that incident will be on that system. And it's easily accessed. It could be such things as where's the best place to break in with minimal damage if you need to, which are the most important parts that need saving in a case of fire, the most valuable assets that need bringing out, things like that. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the front cab. If we look at the back cab, you can see in the rear cab now, there's 4 breathing apparatus sets, 1 for each person. You get a maximum of 4 firefighters in the back. The top left picture is the breathing apparatus board. Now, the breathing apparatus procedure is based on what coal miners used to do, where at the top of the coal mine they would hand in a tally with the name and details on. They'd go down into the mine shaft. When they came back out, they got the tally back. The people in charge knew everybody was safe. It's the same procedure with breathing apparatus. So you hand your tally and it goes into the board. Until recent times, it was just like the miners had. You'd write all the information on, you'd write it over the top just to double check it in case the board fell over. However, now modern technology is taking over, and the board is electronic and it has telemetry, and so the board can speak to the breathing apparatus sets and vice versa. This has many advantages, not least of which being that once of a day you had to be out by your time of whistle, i.e. it was calculated how quickly you would use the air in the cylinder, and you had to be out by that time using your pressure gauge. Now this BA board can talk to your BA set, breathing apparatus set, and it will tell it how much air it's got left. And therefore, for very specific jobs, it's not done all the time, far from it because of health and safety reasons. But there are potential situations where you can work a longer duration beyond what would have been the time of whistle, because the BA board knows you've got enough air left and you're safe. Also in the cab, every square inch of a fire engine, they use every bit of available space for storage. Sorry again there. You can see under the crew cab seat, all sorts of things stored. Mineral water, that's just when you're at an incident, you get hot, sweaty, whether it's up on the moors beating fire, grass fires out, or in a proper working house fire or factory fire. You come out, you just some fresh water for you to drink. The impound kit is if there's a fault with the set, it's just a bag and the kit to put it together. BA guidelines aren't used very often, but they're for big premises. You lay the guideline and follow it. We've got very strict safety procedures on that. And all the other bits and bats underneath there. Also underneath at the bottom pitch is chemical protection suits, which are just wrapped up in the bags. Should you get a chemical incident, you get the suits out, don them over your breathing apparatus sets. There's life jackets because you're working near open water. Current health and safety legislation says you need to wear life jackets. The Raytec gun, things like that, that's just like a heat gun that you can point at something, it gives you the temperature. So for example, again using the acetylene cylinder, if you want to know it's cooling down, you can point it and take regular readings and make sure it's cooling down as it should do. And also the incident command pack, that's there for the officer in charge so that he can set it up and he can record and get somebody to work for him and record everything that's going on. The rear crew cab just has a few extra bits. You can put the breathing apparatus cylinders in a little cabinet there. And they also carry community fire safety information on board. So once they've been to an incident and a fire, if they need to talk to a resident, offer them some advice, maybe fit a smoke alarm after the incident for them, those sort of things, it's all stored in there. Now if we start looking at the lockers, the front offside locker, that's the big locker at the front behind the driver. That's quite a big locker as you can see. The bottom locker is a through locker, so if you empty all the equipment off you can see right through it on this particular appliance. And you can see above that there are shelving units that are trays that actually pull out to make it easier to A, check the equipment, and B, to access the equipment in an emergency. And you can see on the bottom there we've got a light portable pump. That's a self-contained pump that firefighters can carry to an open water supply where you can't get the fire engine near enough, and you can operate it. It's not as big or as powerful as the major pump on the back of the fire engine, but it has its uses, particularly say at barn fires. You've also got the pull-out trays at the top, and at that I think we're going to call it a day because time's caught up on us and this is only a test. Thank you very much.